I wasn't going to do this demo, but when Fran said she was desperate, and I realised why, I said I'll do something on safety boxes, on little boxes, which I've done before, but not, I've been around doing boxes for a long time, but anyway. So the sheet will guide you through, but I wanted to start by saying how I came to be making boxes in the first place. Some of you may know, but after I retired, I worked in Vietnam for a number of years, from about 2009 through to about 2017, in Hanoi, working initially for a Japanese company and then the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank. Vietnamese work strictly to union rules, so weekends were free. I used my weekends by touring the old city, which some of you may know is more than 900 years old, and its streets are like the old medieval towns of Europe, the street of painters, the street of whatevers, the street of tinsmiths, the coppersmiths, and so on. I went looking for, but never found, a street of wood turners, not surprisingly, but up near the cathedral, which is just off the edge of One Kiem Lake, which is the central part of old Vietnam, there was a little shop selling wood turning objects. I used to visit this place quite regularly and got to know the young man running the shop through his interpreter. And when he realised I was terribly interested, he invited me out to his place. It was a shop that made holders for chopsticks, ornamental tea sets for tourists, and it made little boxes. He invited me out at once to the factory, his father's factory, out on the outskirts of Hanoi. This was probably a one-man show, would be putting it mildly. But anyway, it was in a compound by itself. It had two lathes driven by one of those little generators up the back. It had pulleys on either end with leather straps to two workstations. And they rammed a bit of wood on and away they went. Their chisels were unbelievable. Any bit of metal that they could sharpen to a point, usually reinforcing rod, was used. Their deep hollowing tool was an absolute wonder. Think of a 3/4 inch rod, hammered out flat like a screwdriver end, tipped over, and you sharpened the point at the end. But anyway, he also showed me the process of making boxes, lacquering, and other sorts of things, and the polishing. The polishing was also done on a generator. The wives in the family sitting on their haunches with pieces of wood and buffing wheels polishing. These were among some of the products. I'll send them round so you can have a look. Made of Vietnamese rosewood, and they caught my eye immediately. Not only were they nice to hold and look at, but they made the most of the grain in the wood. And I thought, geez, it'd be nice to make boxes like that. So that's where my inspiration came from. And I was part of the Tuesday morning group, the Monday morning group in those days, under Graham Lewis, and these were the first two boxes I made. Round about, they're dated, I think it's about 2016. You all know the late Graham Lewis had meticulous wood turner, exacting standards, and pretty good technique. I'll circulate those because One is this one in Sheoak, and this one in Jarrah, and if I get it right, with grain match. You'll see the grain match as, well, somebody will lift the lid off and you'll lose it, but you can find the grain match again fairly easily. Some of the attributes of a box: small, nicely finished, nicely good in your hand, and it's designing those boxes that I want to talk about this morning. Right, any questions now before we start? Right, if you look at your page, you choose your blank first up. Now, I'm using that wonderful wood called Pinus radiata this morning for all my examples, so you'll have to bear with me, but you're looking for something that you can turn, easy to turn, has got an attractive grain, colour, texture, and it probably means you're looking at Jarrah or what's the other one there? Sheoak, or I quite like mulberry, I quite like fiddlewood. I don't like jacaranda because jacaranda's not for boxes. Jacaranda's pretty featureless. Most of the fruit trees go fairly nicely, but sandalwood, although it's got very little grain, is a beautiful wood to turn into a box. Anyway, so you're looking for a blank that's about the dimensions. You've got some tolerance, but you want somewhere from 60 to 90 mil this way, and 60 to 90 mil this way, but allow for the addition of a spigot. Right? And a spigot, I use, as you'll see when I get round to it, I use a 5 mil guide as a spigot. So add, when you're wanting your vertical size, add 5 mil for your spigot. Next stage, you need to sort out how you're going to mount this on the lathe. I use, and I can't find it, a fixed step centre this end, a live step centre that end. I use step centres because they make minimal dents in the wood. Because you've got a hole in the centre, but the teeth give you a very good grip and don't do much damage to the wood. Couldn't find it, so I'm using this one this morning. Oops. Mount it. You're going to turn it to round, and you're going to decide whether you're going to have, where you're going to mount it after you've turned it to round. I used one of these. I use a Vicmark chuck. It's the smaller one, because the normal jaws on the Vicmark chuck in expansion mode are 45 mil minimum. Contraction mode 35 mil minimum. Keep that in your head because they're the dimensions you need to use. I've written them down for you so you don't forget. And it makes holding on the lathe dead easy. Imagine that's turned around. I put a spigot on the top. I can now get rid of my fixed step centre, and I now have to decide whether I'm making, when I've got my blank, whether I'm putting a spigot on both ends or a spigot and a recess. I typically prefer a recess for reasons that'll become obvious as we go through this talk, for that I use one of these. That's my preferred one. Is that showing up all right? Because that is 5 mil. 5 mil width. So when it's mounted, Vic Mark Chuck, by the way, the jaws are 10 mil deep, but when it's mounted, is that showing up, Emma? You can see 5 mil, just straight in 5 mil. That means when you're doing your calculations, dead easy to measure. So you have to make a decision whether you're going to use a double spigot system or spigot and a recess. Now, I prefer, as I said, a recess. And rather than use a ruler to mark it off, I use a Forstner bit. Minimum 45, minimum 45 on expansion. That's 45 mil. There to there. I prefer a tungsten tip because it gives a clean cut. I use, Jeff, you couldn't give me a knockout marker, could you? I only need to mark the surface because if I go down too deep, I suffer all the weaknesses of using a Forstner bit for boring because of that pointy tip, which is always about 2 mil or 3 mil proud of where the cutters are out on the outside. So I always leave a dent in the middle. So I just use it to mark the outside, and then I clean it out with my small skew, which has been ground 75 degrees and if I fudge a little bit, I can creep up to 46 or 47 mil dead easily. Now, question of depth. This is a Norm Gratt technique. Bottom of his milk carton.
Can you,
3 mil cutout.
Can you flip it over to the other side of the board? We can't see it on the white.
White
Yeah.
on white.
Whatever.
Is that better? No, here.
Not really.
I just hold it up.
That's good.
But well, can you see that?
Yeah.
There, 3 mil. That one, 5 mil. Graham Lewis reckons 1 mil would be enough, and I was never game. That's 3 mil. It's more than enough to hold for our purposes. Because I've used this chisel, I've got a nice little angle already in place to accommodate what I've got there, so I can put this in. And I defy anybody in this room to pull it off the jaws. It's fixed. on a 3mm recess. All right, that takes us down to what?
Step 5.
I've turned it around, it takes it down to 0.4. Now, I put in there at 0.5, sanded off at this point, because this is about, when you've got something like this, because this will be the only time before you come back to reassemble it that you've got the whole lot in one piece. I'd sand down to about 320 grit. And you all know the coloured coated sandpaper? 80, 120, 180, 240, 320, 400. The supplier for this is the South African. He used to come across to the wood shows when we used to have them. But he's, if you want his web address, he works out of country New South Wales. Big South. They come in rolls 100mm wide. I actually ordered a 200mm wide roll that I decided I needed to cut in half with a parting tool. I don't recommend that. It takes the edge off absolutely beautifully. But anyway, so sand to 320. The nice thing about these things, and I won't generate the dust, is all you need to do, hold your paper tight, run up and down. If you've done a decent job with your roughing gouge, it should come up very quickly. There should be no humps and bumps after you. That's actually left as I left it with my roughing gouge. So getting it down to 320 is no great drama. Right. Next job, I've made a decision that I'm using a spigot and recess system. I need to decide whether I'm going to put, when I put the two together, like this, the recess for the lid is going to be on the base or on the lid. So I could push that in so it fitted, or I can cut that in. So but I need to make a decision now about which way I'm going to do it. So I can do it as a lid coming in, and there are occasions when it's good to do that. I normally cut the base out if you're making a straight box, but there are occasions when reversing it makes sense. But I need to now make that decision. Okay? And then I do my markup. I'll stop at that and ask if there's any questions. You won't see it, but I was fiddling it with a base using a texturing tool on this one, which you can do at this stage. I've done the markup, but I'll do it all over again for you. I'm doing the markup so I can separate that from that. And I need to put a trough in the middle where I'll cut some of it out. I use a 10mm trough in the middle. That's it there, you can see that's 10mm. Separate it out. So I need to take 10 mil out at the bottom when marking it up, so to measure it. And I use one of these. It's a very fancy golden mean tool that I bought from New Zealand, but you can make your own, so that you get. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So, if you haven't got one of these, a 3 and 5 rule is quite useful. So you measure from there to there, and it's about 65 or 64, must make it 64. So 3/64, 3/8 is 24, and 5/8 is 40. Yeah, and mark it that way. George?
Could you pass the tool around, the golden mean tool around, please?
Yeah, I will. I'll just finish talking about it, but I will, George. I expect to see it again. The bloke who made these makes them for plastic surgeons, because the golden mean apply. Don't stand there, Jeff, you make me anxious.
I'm sorry, Jim. I just wanted to put them in your pocket before you...
I know. He makes them for plastic surgeons because apparently your face... They started out, the painters, the Italian painters discovered the golden mean. So your nose in relation to, or your mouth in relation to, or whatever, is the golden mean. But anyway. But...
Now, Jim? Now?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, you see, Jim, I chopped the end of my finger off because I hold it up in the air because that lets me breathe.
Okay, Jeff. And we'll be looking to you when it doesn't come back.
Jim, I think Ray Woodcock sells those. I don't know if he still comes up.
Yeah, he was selling his wife. He had quite a bit left over when he's died. Whether his wife has still got a supply, but if you look onto YouTube, you'll find there are some recipes for making your own. But this is a nice, precise little tool that it's got a magnetised lid and all the other lovely little bits. Nice New Zealand timber. Costs a bloody fortune. But anyway, so I've marked it up. And now I have to do the separating. Where did I put my stick? And for this, I use this tool. Bit of mixing steel. Not quite 10 mil, but pretty close to 10 mil. I bring this up. And depending on how it's mounted on the lathe, if I'm using it at the spigot end, and so I'm pressing into the recess end, I'd use a belt when I was a much larger figure. I'm not going to put a dent in the wood, but I'm going to hold it fairly firmly. Not that I need to hold it all that firmly, that's just a safety measure. I'm not going to cut a trough in it because you know how to do all of this yourselves. None of these techniques that I'm showing to date are anything special. You've all done them over and over till they're coming out. But anyway, and away we go. I only go in as far as the recess that I'm wanting either in the lid or in the base to go. So I only go in that far. And make sure it's parallel, that cut is parallel to the bed of the lathe. But if there it is on the 10, and that's as far as I've gone in, I then have to separate it. Now I can go back to this one, which is 5mm, or these, which are 2 to 3mm. That's a McGing's one, this is a Sorby. Or this one, which is a Salvos via Ali Avaseri. And you'll see that it'll cut, and it'll cut away very nicely. Cost me, I think the metal from McGing's was $60. This cost me 15 cents. I took the edge off here, but she'll cut off. I'll just give you a dash, just for fun. It cuts, and it cuts very cleanly and very thinly, so you get the maximum amount of wood left. And rather than go right into the middle, I cut it off with a pull. It's a Japanese pull saw. So once I get down far enough in, I'll then pull it off. So that I get something like this, top and the bottom. I've got a good 5mm clip on there on the bottom, and I've got, well, you can see where I started with the broader one and went in with a narrower one and just sawed it off. You can see the saw marks. Right, so I'll get down to that stage, which is, and I've lost my board. Oh, I'll put my board
Behind you.
forward. Now, there's a question now, because I could turn that, I could finish that, or I could do that next. I used to do this first. I found I got a better fit, or an easier way to getting a fit, by doing the lid first. So how are we doing? No questions up to this point? Now, a mandatory piece of advice from Graham Lewis to me, and I'm giving to you, is when you put the piece into the vise, into the chuck, mark it's somehow so that when you put it back again, it goes back in exactly the same spot, the same set of jaws. I use number 1 jaws as my reference point. Hold it and then push it, and that's back where it was when I turned it last time, and so there should be no wobble. So I've got to clean off the base on the lid and then hollow it out. Which is fairly straightforward. I'm not going to elaborate much on it. There's it being started. You'll notice I've marked the maximum diameter that I can go out when I'm hollowing it out. You can see that lovely tear out that you get from pine. And I'm not quite sure how. I probably use a combination of skew and parting tool to get down that far. Little. Allows me to go in. That's using a parting tool, and that's using a skew. I'll just trim it a little bit using the skew. Now, if I keep that blade there, parallel with the bed of the lathe, I know I'm going straight in. Anything that deviates from being parallel to the bed of the lathe means you're no longer in the vertical. Okay? And I'll go down as deep as I can go. I'm saving up the other hollowing tools till I get to them. Right, that's the lid. Assume that's the lid done and hollowed out, and you will then need to finish your lid off. That's it. I've got a lot of hefty sanding to do on that lid, but you can see that and I've finished it off, so I'll get to the base in a minute, so it's fairly tight to the base. Then I now got to do the base, and there's a lot more stuff to get out of that. So the tools that you need to use are a lot more sophisticated than just a skew and a parting tool or whatever, and we'll come to that in a moment. If you had looked closely at the Vietnamese boxes, you'll find the sides are beautifully narrow or thin, but the base is variable thickness, because once they're on the lathe, they had no technique for gauging the thickness of the base. We don't have much of a gauge either, because you can't see it, and even if you're using Allen's LED light, there's no way you can see it with that either. There's a couple of techniques I learned along the way. One from the late Norm Grack, who introduced me to this little thing. A door stopper, a 3/8 drill, and a beautiful homemade handle out of a throwaway bit of jarrah, where I can gauge the depth and drill to the depth just simply using my stopper. Is that showing up, Anna? So you've got to make provision for the lip at the bottom. Be safe and give yourselves 5mm, and give yourself 5mm for a bottom. And then in you go to your depth. This one's not as deep as. Now that's the depth I'm going to hollow out.
Another one of your devious ideas, Jim?
No, it's Norm Gratz, but it's a beauty. Very expensive. The cost of a 3/8 drill bit, the cost of a rubber door stopper, and whatever handle you've got. And it gives you an accurate depth every time. You don't use it just for boxes. You can use it for bowls and all sorts of things. But it's a great little depth. Now, hollowing out. Some of you may have seen Giulio Marco Longo when he was here, and Giulio only ever used a skew chisel. Did you see him? Did any of you see his demos? He was a skew man, a skew and texturing tool, and most of us would get a bowl gouge, put a little mark on the outside so that the bowl didn't slip past that, then slowly hollow out, working towards the centre. Not Giulio. He started in here. Right. I'll do a little bit just so you can see. But before he did that, the important item was to mark how far down he was going. If you don't, it's a chance of saying goodbye to all that you've done. And the easiest way to mark it is a bit of blue tape. God, I do like my home lathe. So there's my depth for the chisel. Anything, looking at that line there, anything deeper than that and I'm in trouble. I'll take a smidgen out to show you how it works. On centre. And I can go all the way down to the bottom and go out progressively out to the width that I want. One way of deep hollowing. The dead easy way is to go back to your Forstner bits and step it. So we can use this Forstner, mark it out to how deep we want to go and go in again. That's, I think that's about 25 or 30. you know that's 45 and that's 60. So by the time I mark it down about there, I'm just about bored out to the bottom. So the easiest way to get rid of all the stuff that's in there is to use your Forstner bits if you've got them. Make sure though that you mark the depth, otherwise you get a bit of excitement at some stage. And make sure also you always make allowance for the bit at the bottom. Right, any questions about that?
I've got a comment. When you're doing that, you put the biggest one in first and just bake a little indent, so when you do use your small one, you lose your centre. So then when you put your next one up, it can drift. So that's why you use your big one first, just to get it.
Yeah, well, you want to make sure that the big one's not too big either.
No, but I mean,
So you use the big one.
big one
Yeah.
first just to get it in.
I hadn't thought of that, Chris, and that's a good idea. I haven't had much of a problem, but because I keep the speed fairly much lower than you would with a tungsten tip. I keep the speed around about 300-400, but yeah, but that's a good idea. You know what Chris is saying. You mark it on the go in part of the way on the outside, so that you reduce that drift of because you've taken out the centre because of the bore, so it'll likely can move around the centre. But if it's jammed in tightly enough, it should be all right. And if you don't get too excited with your speed, it should be all right. All right?
Jim, what's the idea of using a 3/8 drill bit when you're going to step it up from a Forstner bit? Why not just use your Forstner bit for your depth in the first place? What's the point of doing your 3/8 drill? You wouldn't get that with a Forstner bit.
I don't always use a Forstner bit, but I do want to know where the bottom is, and I still reckon this is the best way of finding where I want to go for the bottom. And it's dead easy. Just make sure you've got a centrepiece that's not going to rattle on you, and just push in till you forget. This needs sharpening. It needs sharpening a bit now, but otherwise it's fine. And that is immovable. Once you get to there, it won't go any. Jeff, pass it round and you can have a try. It won't go any further. But it can go up and down if you twist. Alan?
What you could do is you can use your Forstner bits first, right, to get, as you said, go in 3 mils with the bigger one, then 3 mils, then 3 mils. And once you've got to the smaller one, then you can possibly put your drill bit in to get your depth like that. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I find standing at the lathe here and looking down, I can see where I can line them up much easier. It lines up dead easily.
If you're going to use the 3/8 drill bit, are you not then going to turn it with just ordinary turning tools rather than with Forstner bits? Is that not what you said?
I can do that. I can do it that way as well. And I'm just coming to that, George. So I can take it out using that and a variety of other tools, and then when I got down to the bottom, I need to round it off. And I've got several options. These are all ring tools. That's a 6mm ring. That's a Hope tool. Simon Hope is an Southern English wood turner. That's an 8mm. And this is again a Simon Hope tool, a 10mm. So depending on what I want to pull out, I can use these as scooping. The trick, and Alan's machines are no doubt set up that way as well, is to make sure that you're not cutting there or you're not cutting there. If you're cutting there, you're not cutting. If you're cutting there, you're cutting too aggressively and it's likely to do all sorts of... But if you turn it to a 45-degree angle,
45 slightly.
you should be able... That's a bit high. But if you come in on centre and turn it on a 45-degree angle, anyway, you can see that I was pulling it out. Now, and you know when you've got to the bottom because you've got the impress from the drill.
Yeah, we've got it here, Jim.
Yeah, so you get that impress and you level off. Then I used my magic tool. But my magic tool is this one. Can you see that one, Emma? It's a Cindy Drozda tool. And if you look at it, got a very sharp bevel and a nice curve. It's a negative rake scraper down in the bottom, just pivot it around, it gets into it leaves you a lovely round corner. You can see it. I'll send you one around. You can put my son down here at Christmas time. I got him to bring me. Him to bring me one. This definitely is a boomerang, Jeff. But it's a Cindy Drozda ferrule that you can stick it in. It's a Thompson tool. Those of you who know Thompson, it's terrific steel. Keeps the edge forever and a day. Leave the top on because you can see. And because it's a negative rake scraper, you just simply come in straight and pivot. Right, I'll pause at that point to see if there are any questions forthcoming. So the reason I stopped short for going all the way in, and the reason I do the bottom last to fit, is because I can now, once it's hollowed out, I can now fit the lid to the bottom. Now you can see that's a bit tight. Because if you look at it, I've chamfered it a wee bit to fit. But I'm not going to do it in case this thing drops. I can now come in, keep that blade, these thick mark lathes where you look at them and they stop. You can come in, keep your blade parallel with the lathe bed, and I can pare away very gently with this. That's not, it's closer, it's not there yet, and go progressively in. Well, there I am. All done. And I use this because while I'm coming in level there, I'm undercutting with a point. If I was going, I could use this one, but I'm coming in straight with the point. No undercutting, so that the join may not be as tight. See how tight that join is? Because I've undercut. So I could pair this away using this, but the value is you can do it using this, making sure your blade and the lathe bed are in parallel and you're undercutting. Everybody have a chance to look at that Droster tool? Right, now, where did we get to? Now, I can finish sanding the base. Have I got it yet? That's what I was looking for right back at the beginning. Who put those notes down? Covered it. But I use that step centre within a chuck. It's a fixed, so Jeff, pass it around so people can have a look. I don't know where it came from, probably a McJing special, but it fits nicely within the chuck so that I can start with a mounted Vicmark chuck. What I was looking for and can't find is a piece of polyurethane cut to fit that, so that I can sand the base or sand and hold it firmly in the chuck using that polythene pipe rather than using the jaws, because you all know once you use the jaws you'd put a dent in the wood. Put a dent in the polythene, it doesn't matter. I've got several that I just keep above the bench and just pull them down and slap on the base. All right, so we've got to the point where we've polished top and bottom this. There we are. They're all beautifully polished inside and beautifully polished outside. And now I've got to do something about this and this. I can take this spigot off holding it this way, but I'd like to have made a little dent. I'd like to have made a little dent in the lid. I don't want to do that, so this is that's probably worked. This is a little bit loose, but it might just... No. Have faith, have faith. Just in case it does. warm up. Just to show it warm up. But I can now take that spigot off. That's quite heated away with you can heat it away a little bit this way and this way, and when you're ready, finish it off, because there's enough holding power here. Finish it off that way with a negative rake scraper, because I've only left a little bit in the middle that I can heat away and just finish off. It's a bit rough on the inside and I'm not interested, but and it's not really sanded down properly, but could do with a bit more sanding. Thanks, Jeff. In that case, I haven't gone straight. I've just done a little embellishing across the lid. I could go straight across the lid. I could, and here's an example. Recess, painted it black, and stuck in one of these Rod Cox specials at $5 a time, little bling things, great for grandkids. That's the fish one, finished in, that's loose, came loose this morning because it's just attached with a bit of super glue around the rim. So keep that on top, have a look at it, but don't let, and you'll find, Bob, when you're looking at that the fit between lid and base is quite tight because I've undercut both. And because it was a straight grain piece of timber, I got a reasonable piece of grain match. If it's not a straight piece of grain, you can decorate the join with various techniques, just to camouflage where the join is. But if you use this as a finishing tool, because it undercuts, you won't get a terrible join anyway. Right, I want to talk a little bit about sanding, so I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. Now, the trick to all of this is the finish. You've got to have, and this is what Graham Lewis used to hound me. He'd see scratches where I couldn't. It's not finished. I said, oh, bloody hell, Graham. It is. No, it's not. And he'll see them and he'll point them out. I'm sure other people have experienced that problem as well. It's a sanding and finishing technique. Those of us who judge people's work, the thing that that strike us most is beautiful bit of turning, lovely bit of timber, but oh my goodness, finished awfully. They could have done just a little bit more.
You've been writing this script.
Now, the Whirligig sander is pretty good. Most of you are familiar with the Whirligig sander. I've got, for boxes, I always go down to 1000 grit. It just finishes it off very nicely. I certainly use that for competition piece. The coloured paper gets me up to 400 and then I run from there. A very useful bit of flexible paper I get from Abrasi Flex, which is in Walspool Road. 400 to 600, 600 or 500 to 800, and this takes me up to 1,000. I'll pass them round, you can have a look at them. But for boxes, very handy, because you can just put your hand over the top and away you go. Thanks, Jeff.
Cheers.
And for the insides, there are a series of things that you can use. This is a multi-purpose, the beginning of a multi-purpose inside sander. It's a bit of when Willie Nelson was working in the torpedo shop at Coburn at the naval base, he was handing out bits of high-density plastic that thick, which I chopped. I got a piece. It cuts and turns quite adequately. Bore a hole in it and turn it to a shape that you want. In this case, fairly a round one, or in this case, cylindrical, in this case a round one. Tap some Velcro on it and use Abranet. Was it Abranet or Abrasi Flex? Abranet's great because you can clean it out easily. And I've made the stick long enough so that I can get down that deep. So I use it for vases and a variety of things. I'll pass those around, Jeff, so people can have a look at them. Easy to make, cheap. The sandpaper is not. Jeff, I'll get you to circulate that as well. For people who haven't come across Abranet before, that's a piece of 500. It's a woven, it's a fabric type thing, so that it's easy to take it off and dust it off, but it'll stick quite readily to Velcro.
So where do you get that from, Jim?
That Timbercon are selling it. They're not selling it cheaply.
$2 a sheet.
How much?
$2 a piece.
Is that? Oh, that's come down in price.
That's
Yeah, it was.
Timbercon, is it?
It was very expensive. It was $2 a sheet, and it the grit goes from at least 80 up to. That's a 500 off circulating. I think it goes beyond 500, but they're great for sanding. Oh, wax and polish. I use one of two sealers, shellac. If it's a darkish wood or a reddish wood, I'll use shellac. Jarrah, Sheoak fits that. If it's not, I'll use a polyurethane thinner mix, so a lacquer thinner mix. Using it fairly thin. This is I've learned where the streaking comes from. If the stuff is too thick, or you put it on too firmly, it won't repay you for your efforts. So you put it on gently and let it soak in and rub it off. And before you put a wax on, just cut it back a little bit with very fine sandpaper. For waxing, I never use anything more than a homemade version of Triple E. I put some extra Triple E powder in it, so it's greater cutting. And,
Where do you get your Triple E powder from, Jim?
pardon?
Where do you get your powder from?
Carbotech, Timbercon.
That Timbercon don't have it anymore.
They used to sell it. Carol's, I think, sell it. I try to avoid places where there's postage involved, but Carol's will supply it for you. I don't know. I bought a bottle from Timbercon years ago, and I still haven't used it all up.
Is Robin still selling that stuff of hers?
Pardon?
Does Robin still sell that stuff she made?
I don't know. You probably could use talcum powder, but it's really just a pumice. So if you're using a skin abrasive stuff, grind that down and you probably... And now that we're all over, there are a number of very good references. The Bible, always. Richard Raffin. Made a fortune out of wood turners, this bloke. I found this one particularly useful. Chris Stott, he's got a variety of boxes in there, which he's dimensioned. You don't need to follow his. He's drawn plans for, shows a photograph of, and dimensioned. You don't necessarily have to follow his dimensions. More recently, we've got both of those. We used to have both of those in the cupboard here. I don't know if we still have. I don't think we have this, but this one is using a threading device to make boxes that are threaded. And more recently, this one has been published. It's got some great stuff in it. I'll pass all four around. I know that's many. They correspond with that many fingers on my left hand. So I hope to be able to say Raffin, Stott. Right. Any questions?
Yeah, you did well.
Well, my last shot. Was I wrote a paper to the Committee of Management Wawa saying how boring demonstrations were because we sat watching people exhibit techniques that we knew how to do. I was trying to avoid that this morning. It takes an additional preparation, and I reckon I succeeded reasonably well.
You did.
Now, before I finish, I have a vote of thanks that I've got to make on all our behalf to the Greens and to Emma for these Wednesday mornings. They're great. The morning teas, although I was too late getting in there, so
You've got to be quick.
the vultures had already been before I got there. But anyway, the three of them do a great job, for which I think we should all be very grateful. So, thank you.
Well done, thank you, Chris.